Ma'am, this seat isn't for people like you. Move to the back where you belong or I'll have security drag you off my aircraft. The words cut through the pressurized air of Atlas Airlines Flight 447 like a blade. Captain Derek Morrison stood in the narrow aisle of business class, his silver-striped uniform radiating authority, his gray eyes cold with certainty. He wasn't asking. He was commanding. The woman in seat 2B looked up from her tablet. Dr. Zara Williams, 44, possessed the kind of calm that comes from weathering storms others couldn't imagine. Her dark skin seemed to glow under the cabin lights, her natural hair pulled back in a neat professional style. She wore a simple navy blazer over dark jeans, no flashy jewelry, no designer labels, nothing that screamed wealth or power. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice steady and clear. "You're making the biggest mistake of your career." Morrison's lip curled into a sneer. "The only mistake here is you thinking you can sit in my business class cabin without belonging here." He gestured toward the economy section behind them. "There are plenty of seats back there where you'll be more comfortable." Other passengers began to take notice. A man in 1A discreetly activated his phone camera. An elderly woman in 3C clutched her pearls, her mouth forming a perfect O of shock. The cabin moments before filled with the comfortable murmur of boarding passengers fell into an uncomfortable silence. Zara remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "I have a confirmed reservation for this seat. I paid full fare. Unless there's a specific safety or mechanical reason for this request, I will not be moving." The reason, Morrison said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that somehow carried throughout the cabin, is that I am the captain of this aircraft, and I decide who sits where. What Captain Derek Morrison didn't know was that in exactly 18 minutes, his 28-year career would be over. In 18 minutes, his pension would be gone. In 18 minutes, his world would collapse when the woman he was trying to humiliate revealed that she controlled a $22 billion federal budget and had the power to ground his airline with a single phone call. But those 18 minutes hadn't passed yet, and Morrison was just getting started. The scene was Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport Gate B-12 on a Tuesday morning that would become legendary in aviation circles. Flight 447 to Washington, D.C. was Atlas Airlines' flagship route, a premium service that catered to politicians, lobbyists, and business executives. The Airbus A321 gleamed in the desert sun, its white fuselage bearing the red and blue Atlas logo. Dr. Zara Williams had specifically chosen this flight, this airline, this route. For 3 months, her office had been receiving anonymous complaints through social media Reddit posts and encrypted whistleblower channels. Stories of passengers being moved, downgraded, or humiliated on Atlas Airlines flights. Stories that followed a pattern. Stories that always seemed to involve the same type of passenger and the same flight crews. Zara wasn't just any federal employee. She was the Commissioner of Civil Rights for the Federal Aviation Administration, a position that made her one of the most powerful regulatory officials in the country. She oversaw investigations, levied fines that could reach tens of millions of dollars, and had the authority to shut down airlines that violated federal law. But today, she looked like any other passenger. That was the point. Morrison had been flying for Atlas Airlines since 1996. He'd worked his way up from regional routes to the coveted transcontinental runs, earning the respect of management and the fear of his crews. Behind his back, flight attendants called him the Sheriff because of his iron grip on what he considered his aircraft. He had rules. Unwritten rules. Business class was for people who belonged there, people who looked the part, people who wouldn't embarrass the airline or make other passengers uncomfortable. It wasn't official policy, but everyone knew. The gate agents knew. The flight attendants knew. Management knew, though they'd never admit it. Over the years, Morrison had perfected his approach. A Latino businessman might be told there was a documentation issue that required him to move to economy while it was sorted out. An elderly black woman might be informed that her seat had a mechanical problem and she needed to be temporarily relocated to the back of the plane. A young woman traveling alone might be told that her ticket was flagged for security review. The excuses were always plausible. The targets were always carefully chosen. And until today, no one had ever challenged him with the power to do anything about it. Morrison looked down at Zara, his jaw set with the confidence of a man who had never lost a confrontation on his aircraft. "You have 30 seconds to gather your things and move, or I'm calling security. This is your final warning." The passengers around them held their breath. Phones were recording now, multiple angles capturing every word, every gesture, every moment of what was about to become the most expensive 18 minutes in aviation history. Zara met his gaze without flinching. Her voice carried a quiet authority that seemed to vibrate through the aircraft. "Captain Morrison, what you do in the next few minutes will be remembered for the rest of your life. Choose carefully." Morrison's eyes narrowed. He'd heard that tone before from passengers who thought they were important, thought they had connections, thought they could intimidate him with vague threats about lawyers or lawsuits. They were always wrong. "Security to gate B12, he said into his radio, never breaking eye contact with Zara. "We have a non-compliant passenger refusing lawful crew instructions." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. In the aviation world, non-compliant passenger was serious business. It was grounds for removal for arrest for being placed on no-fly lists. But as Morrison waited for security to arrive, as the other passengers watched in fascination and horror as the phones continued recording, none of them knew that they were witnessing the opening moments of a reckoning that would reshape an entire industry. The countdown had begun. Dr. Zara Williams had learned about dignity the hard way. Growing up in Detroit in the 1980s, she'd watched her mother Sandra work 3 jobs to keep their small apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots served as a lullaby. Sandra cleaned offices at night, worked retail during the day, and spent weekends catering wedding receptions. Also, her daughter could have something she'd never had options. Zara's first flight was at age 12, a reward for straight A's, funded by her mother's sacrifice of Christmas presents that year. As the plane lifted off from Detroit Metro, Zara pressed her face against the window and made a promise to herself. Someday she would make sure that everyone, regardless of the color of their skin or the size of their bank account, could experience the magic of flight with dignity. That promise had driven her through college on a full scholarship, through law school, working nights at a legal aid clinic, through her early career at the Department of Justice, where she specialized in civil rights violations. When the FAA created a new position for Commissioner of Civil Rights in 2018, Zara was the unanimous choice. Her corner office in Washington, D.C. overlooked the Potomac River, but the view she treasured most was the framed photograph on her desk. Sandra Williams, 68 years old, sitting in the first-class cabin of a Delta flight to Paris, champagne glass raised in a toast, tears of joy streaming down her face. That photo had been taken 2 years ago when Zara surprised her mother with the trip of a lifetime. Baby Sandra had whispered during that flight, "Look how far we've come," now sitting in seat 2B of Flight 447. Zara thought about how far they all had to go. Captain Derek Morrison's story was different but equally defining. Born in Phoenix in 1972 to a family where aviation was religion, he'd grown up believing the cockpit was his birthright. His father had been a pilot for America West, his grandfather had flown cargo planes during World War II, and his great-grandfather had been a barnstormer in the 1920s. Morrison had earned his pilot's license at 17, his commercial rating at 20, and his airline transport license by 25. He was good at flying, great at it even, but what he excelled at was control. In the cockpit, his word was law. In the cabin, his presence commanded respect. On his aircraft, he was God. Over the years, that sense of absolute authority had calcified into something darker. Morrison had begun to see his role not just as pilot, but as gatekeeper of an exclusive club. Business class wasn't just a section of the airplane. It was a statement about who belonged in the upper echelons of society. He'd developed what he privately called his quality control protocol. If a passenger didn't look like they belonged in premium seating, Morrison would find a reason to move them. A computer glitch that required reseating. A weight and balance issue that mandated passenger redistribution. A security concern that necessitated additional screening. The excuses were endless, and they worked because people believed that airline personnel had legitimate reasons for their actions. Who would question a captain's authority on his own aircraft? Morrison's crew had learned not to question him either. Flight attendants who pushed back found themselves assigned to less desirable routes. Those who complained faced subtle retaliation that was impossible to prove but devastating to their careers. The message was clear. Go along with the captain's preferences or find another job. Rebecca Martinez, 28, had joined Atlas Airlines just 3 months earlier. Fresh out of flight attendant training, she was still on probation, still learning the unwritten rules that determined who survived in the industry. She'd noticed Morrison's pattern immediately, but she was a single mother with a 4-year-old daughter and a mountain of student loans. She couldn't afford to be a hero. Standing in the galley now, watching Morrison confront the woman in 2B, Rebecca felt sick to her stomach. She knew what was coming. She'd seen it before with other passengers, other flights, other excuses. The drill was always the same approach: the passenger politely offer a better seat in economy, apply gentle pressure until they moved. But something felt different this time. The woman wasn't backing down. Her calm confidence radiated a power that Rebecca couldn't identify but definitely recognized. This wasn't just another passenger trying to fly above their station. This was someone who belonged exactly where she was sitting. Jake Henderson, 35. The senior flight attendant felt no such qualms. He'd been working with Morrison for 8 years and had learned that life was easier when you went along with the captain's preferences. Morrison protected his crew, got them better schedules, and made sure they were taken care of. All he asked in return was loyalty. Jake had watched Morrison's quality control operations dozens of times. The captain had a gift for reading people, for knowing who would cause trouble and who would quietly accept their reassignment. It was all about maintaining the right atmosphere in business class, keeping the premium passengers comfortable and happy. As Jake watched the confrontation developing, he prepared to play his usual supporting role. He would back up Morrison's authority, help implement whatever excuse the captain devised, and ensure that order was maintained on their flight. Marcus Rivera. 31 sat in seat 1A with his laptop open and his phone discreetly recording. As a tech executive who flew 200,000 miles a year, Marcus had seen his share of airline drama, but nothing quite like this. The captain's hostility toward the woman was palpable, unprofessional, and completely inappropriate. Marcus had built his company by recognizing patterns, and the pattern here was obvious. A well-dressed, articulate black woman was being harassed by a white captain who clearly believed she didn't belong in business class. It was discrimination, pure and simple, and it was being recorded in high definition. His Instagram live stream, which had started as a casual flying to DC update, now had over 50,000 viewers watching the drama unfold in real time. The chat was exploding with comments. Hashtags were already trending, and Marcus knew he was capturing something significant. Sarah Thompson, 29, stood behind the gate counter at B12, watching the delay on her departure board with growing anxiety. As the Atlas Airlines gate agent, she was responsible for getting Flight 447 out on time, but something was clearly happening on the aircraft. Captain Morrison's request for security had set off alarm bells throughout the airport. Sarah had worked with Morrison dozens of times and knew about his particular standards for business class seating. She'd been instructed informally but clearly to be selective about who got upgraded and who was allowed to purchase premium seats. It was never stated explicitly, But the message was understood. Atlas Airlines had a certain image to maintain. Now, watching security officers walk down the jet bridge, Sarah wondered if Morrison's unwritten policies were about to become a very public problem. She'd heard whispers from other gate agents about complaints about passengers who'd posted negative reviews about lawyers asking questions. But Atlas Airlines management had always protected Morrison. He was a senior captain with an impeccable safety record and strong passenger satisfaction scores. At least that's what the official report said. Trevor Walsh, 22, stood at the gate counter clutching a standby ticket and trying to process what was happening. A college student at Arizona State, he was hoping to catch a ride to D.C. to visit his girlfriend at Georgetown. His father's college roommate worked in Atlas Airlines management, and a quick phone call had gotten Trevor onto the standby list with a wink and a promise that business class might have an opening. Now it looked like that opening was being created through some kind of confrontation on the aircraft. Trevor didn't understand the details, but he could see passengers pressed against the windows, phones raised recording something inside the cabin. Whatever was happening, it looked serious. As security officers boarded the plane, as Morrison's voice echoed from inside the aircraft, as social media began to buzz with hashtags and streaming video, none of them realized they were witnessing the opening act of a drama that would change all their lives forever. The forces that had shaped each of them. Zara's determination, Morrison's arrogance, Rebecca's fear, Jake's loyalty, Marcus's sense of justice, Sarah's complicity, Trevor's privilege, were about to collide with the explosive force of federal law and viral media. In 18 minutes, some of them would be heroes. Others would be destroyed. All of them would be changed. The countdown continued. The tension in the cabin thickened like storm clouds gathering over the desert. Captain Morrison stood over Zara Williams, his uniform casting a shadow across her seat, his presence designed to intimidate. But Zara remained perfectly still. Her hands folded, her expression serene. "This is your last chance," Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Gather your belongings and move to economy or face the consequences." Captain Zara replied, her voice steady and professional. "I need you to state the specific operational reason for this request. FAA regulations require justification for passenger reseating." Morrison's eyes flashed with annoyance. Passengers weren't supposed to know regulations. They weren't supposed to quote rules or make demands. They were supposed to comply quietly and without fuss. The reason, he said, leaning closer, is that I have received a complaint from other passengers about inappropriate behavior in the business class cabin. It was his go-to excuse, impossible to verify and difficult to challenge. Who could argue with the comfort and safety of other passengers? But Zara didn't blink. Which passengers complained? What specific behavior? When did these complaints occur? The questions hung in the air like accusations. Morrison felt heat rising in his chest. This woman was different from his usual targets. She wasn't backing down, wasn't accepting his authority, wasn't playing by the rules he'd established over 28 years of flying. "I don't need to justify my decisions to you," Morrison snapped. "This is my aircraft, my rules, my authority." Rebecca Martinez stood frozen in the galley, watching the confrontation with growing horror. She'd been ordered to approach the passenger and offer an economy seat, but something about the woman's confidence made her hesitate. This wasn't going according to the usual script. Rebecca Morrison barked without taking his eyes off Zara. "Escort this passenger to her new seat in the main cabin." Rebecca's hands trembled as she approached. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Ma'am, we have a lovely aisle seat in row 18. It's actually quite comfortable, and you'll have more legroom." "I appreciate the offer," Zara said gently, "but I'll be remaining in my assigned seat. Unless, of course, Captain Morrison can provide the required operational justification for the change." Morrison's face flushed red. In 30 seconds, this passenger had questioned his authority, quoted regulations, and made his flight attendant look incompetent. Worse, she'd done it all while remaining completely calm and professional. Fine, Morrison snarled. You want operational justification? This is a security issue. You're creating a disturbance questioning crew authority and making other passengers uncomfortable. That's grounds for removal. The words were carefully chosen. Security issue and disturbance were magic phrases in aviation justifications that could be used to remove any passenger for any reason. Once Morrison labeled her a security risk, Zara would have no recourse. But as he spoke, Marcus Rivera's live stream was exploding. 50,000 viewers had become 100,000, and the comments were pouring in faster than the platform could display them. This is discrimination. Where is this flight? Someone call the news record. Everything. Don't let them get away with this. Atlas Airlines. Discrimination is trending. Marcus kept his phone steady, capturing every word, every gesture, every moment of what was rapidly becoming the most watched airline incident in social media history. An elderly woman in seat 3C, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, had been watching with growing dismay. A retired schoolteacher from Phoenix, she'd witnessed enough bullying in her 72 years to recognize it when she saw it. Without saying a word, she pulled out her own phone and began recording. Young man, she called to Marcus, her voice carrying the authority of decades in the classroom. Are you getting all of this? Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied, his phone never wavering. Every single word. Morrison spun around, suddenly aware that multiple passengers were recording. Turn those off immediately. Recording is not permitted during crew operations, actually. Zara said, her voice cutting through Morrison's bluster. Passengers have the right to record incidents involving their own safety and security. That's established federal precedent. Morrison's jaw clenched. This woman knew too much, spoke too confidently, remained too calm. Normal passengers got flustered when confronted by authority. They backed down, they apologized, they moved to economy without further protest. But Zara Williams wasn't a normal passenger. Jake Morrison called to his senior flight attendant. I need you to witness this passenger's refusal to comply with crew instructions. Jake Henderson stepped forward, his loyalty to Morrison overriding any doubts about what he was witnessing. He'd learned long ago that questioning the captain led nowhere good. Ma'am, Jake said in his most professional voice, I'm witnessing Captain Morrison's request for you to move to economy seating. Your refusal to comply constitutes interference with crew operations, which is a federal offense. The phrase federal offense was designed to scare passengers into submission. Most people had no idea what actually constituted a federal offense, but the words sounded serious enough to end most confrontations. Zara looked at Jake with something approaching pity. Mr. Henderson, is it? What you're witnessing is a passenger exercising her legal rights under federal transportation law. What's about to become a federal offense is the discriminatory treatment I'm receiving based on my race. The word race hung in the cabin like a thunderclap. Morrison had been careful never to use racial language, never to make explicit references to Zara's appearance. But everyone in the cabin knew what this was about. Everyone could see the pattern. Don't play the race card. Morrison snapped, his composure finally cracking. This has nothing to do with race. This is about appropriate behavior and following crew instructions. Then explain, Zara said, her voice carrying a new edge. Why you haven't asked any other business class passengers to move. Explain why my behavior is inappropriate when I've been sitting quietly reading on my tablet, bothering no one. Morrison opened his mouth, then closed it. The question was simple, direct, and impossible to answer without revealing the discriminatory nature of his actions. The livestream viewer count hit 200,000. Hashtags were multiplying across social media platforms. Captain Morrison was trending alongside Atlas Airlines' discrimination and racism at 30,000 feet. Local news stations in Phoenix were starting to pick up the story. Reporters were calling Atlas Airlines corporate headquarters. The company's social media team was fielding hundreds of angry comments and demands for explanations. But inside the cabin of Flight 447, the confrontation was reaching its breaking point. Security, Morrison said into his radio, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I need immediate assistance at Gate B12. We have a non-compliant passenger who needs to be removed from the aircraft." The words carried the finality of a judge's gavel. In Morrison's experience, the threat of security was usually enough to end any passenger rebellion. But as he waited for officers to board, he realized this situation was unlike anything he'd faced before. Zara remained seated, calm as still water. Her hands were folded in her lap, her posture relaxed, her expression serene. She looked like someone who was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was supposed to do. "Captain Morrison," she said quietly, "in about 10 minutes, you're going to wish you'd handled this differently." "Is that a threat?" Morrison demanded. "It's a fact," Zara replied. "You're about to learn that actions have consequences." 2 Phoenix Sky Harbor security officers appeared in the cabin doorway, their presence immediately commanding attention from every passenger. Officer David Kim and Officer Maria Santos were experienced professionals who'd handled hundreds of passenger removals, but something about this situation felt different. "What's the issue?" Captain Officer Kim asked. Morrison straightened his uniform, reasserting his authority. "This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions. She's being belligerent and creating a disturbance. I need her removed from the aircraft." Officer Santos looked at Zara, who was sitting quietly in her seat. Hands folded, expression calm. She'd seen truly belligerent passengers before, and this woman didn't fit the profile. "Ma'am," Officer Santos said professionally, "could you please step off the aircraft with us? We can sort this out at the gate." Zara looked up at the officers, her expression unchanged. "Officers, before I comply, I need to show you something." She reached into her briefcase, her movements deliberate and calm. Morrison tensed, suddenly wondering what this mysterious passenger might produce. A lawyer's card, a complaint form, a frequent flyer status, confirmation. As Zara's hand emerged from her briefcase, the cabin fell completely silent. Marcus Rivera's phone captured every moment. Mrs. Patterson held her breath. Rebecca Martinez felt her heart pounding. Jake Henderson sensed that everything was about to change. Trevor Walsh had been called forward from the gate, told that a business-class seat had become available. As he walked down the jet bridge, he could hear raised voices from inside the aircraft. Whatever was happening, it sounded serious. Sarah Thompson watched from the gate counter as security officers boarded her flight, as passenger phones captured video through the aircraft windows as her departure board showed Flight 447 slipping further and further behind schedule. In corporate headquarters in Atlanta, Atlas Airlines executives were starting to receive urgent phone calls. Social media mentions were spiking. The company's stock price was beginning to fluctuate. Something was happening in Phoenix, and it was getting attention. But none of them knew what Zara Williams was about to pull from her briefcase. None of them knew that Captain Derek Morrison's 28-year career was about to end. None of them knew that in the next 60 seconds, everything would change forever. The countdown was almost over. Marcus Rivera's Instagram Live viewer count exploded past 300,000 as Zara Williams reached into her briefcase. The chat was moving so fast it became a blur of outrage, support, and disbelief. "Record everything. This is pure racism. Call the FBI. Atlas. Airlines stock is gonna crash. Justice for Zara trending worldwide." Marcus had started the stream as a casual travel update, but now he realized he was documenting something historic. His hands remained steady despite his racing heart capturing every gesture, every word, every moment of what was about to become the most explosive airline incident of the decade. "Y'all," Marcus whispered into his phone. "I don't know who this woman is, but she's about to drop something major on this racist pilot." Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, the retired teacher in 3C, had been teaching for 47 years when she retired. She'd seen enough injustice to fill several lifetimes, but she'd also learned that sometimes one person with courage could change everything. Her own phone was recording a backup to Marcus's stream evidence that couldn't be suppressed or deleted. "Young lady," she called to Zara, her voice carrying decades of classroom authority. "You show them exactly who you are." Trevor Walsh stood at the aircraft door, confused and increasingly uncomfortable. He'd been called forward to take a business class seat, but the atmosphere inside the cabin was electric with tension. Through the doorway, he could see passengers with phones raised recording what looked like a serious confrontation. "Is everything okay?" he asked Rebecca Martinez, who was standing near the galley, looking like she might be sick. Rebecca's eyes darted between Trevor and the unfolding drama. There's been a misunderstanding. Captain Morrison is handling it." But even as she said the words, Rebecca knew this was no misunderstanding. This was exactly what Morrison always did, what she'd been instructed to help with, what the entire crew had learned to accept as normal. The only difference was that this time the whole world was watching. Jake Henderson felt the weight of 300,000 pairs of digital eyes on him. He'd supported Morrison's quality control operations dozens of times, but those had always been private, discreet, witnessed only by a handful of passengers who rarely complained and never had proof. Now, every word was being broadcast live, every gesture captured in high definition, every decision recorded for posterity. The comfortable shadows where discrimination thrived were being illuminated by the harsh light of viral media. Officer David Kim had been handling passenger removals for 8 years, but something about this situation didn't feel right. The woman in 2B wasn't acting like someone who'd done something wrong. She wasn't defensive, wasn't argumentative, wasn't showing any of the signs he'd learned to associate with problem passengers. Instead, she radiated a calm confidence that spoke of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, someone who held cards that hadn't been revealed yet. "Ma'am, Officer Kim said we need to see what you're reaching for. Please move slowly." Zara nodded, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Of course, officer. I'm simply retrieving my identification." But as her hand emerged from the briefcase, it wasn't holding a driver's license or passport. It was holding a black leather wallet that opened to reveal something that made Officer Kim's eyes widen in recognition. The viewer count hit 400,000. Screenshots were being shared across Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook. News alerts were starting to ping on phones across the country. Atlas Airlines discrimination had become the #1 trending topic in the United States. CNN's aviation correspondent was already pulling up information about Flight 447. Local Phoenix news stations were dispatching crews to Sky Harbor Airport. Atlas Airlines' stock price was beginning to drop as algorithmic trading systems detected the negative social media sentiment. Captain Morrison stood frozen, staring at whatever Zara was holding, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and growing horror. Officer Santos leaned in to get a better look, her expression shifting from routine professionalism to shocked attention. "Oh my God," Rebecca Martinez whispered loud enough for Marcus's stream to pick up. "Oh my God. Who is she?" The question reverberated through the digital audience. Chat messages flooded in with guesses, theories, and demands for answers. Someone had started a Twitter thread attempting to identify the mysterious passenger. Reddit detectives were mobilizing, analyzing every frame of the video for clues. Meanwhile, at Atlas Airlines headquarters in Atlanta, the company's crisis management team was finally beginning to understand the scope of what was happening. Social media monitoring systems were screaming red alerts. The company's phone lines were lighting up with calls from reporters, regulators, and furious customers. David Richardson, Atlas Airlines' CEO, was in a board meeting when his assistant burst through the door, tablet in hand. "Sir, we have a situation. Flight 447 in Phoenix. There's a video going viral. Our stock is down 4% in the last 10 minutes. Richardson grabbed the tablet, his face growing pale as he watched Marcus Rivera's live stream. The viewer count was approaching 500,000. The incident was being covered by major news outlets. His airline was becoming the poster child for discrimination in real time. "Get me Morrison on the phone," Richardson barked. Now. But Captain Morrison wasn't answering his phone. He was standing in the aisle of his aircraft, staring at the identification in Zara Williams's hand, finally understanding the magnitude of his mistake. Trevor Walsh had crept closer to get a better view of what was happening. As a college student, he was fluent in social media, and he could see passengers live streaming, taking photos, creating content that would outlive him. Without fully understanding what he was witnessing, he pulled out his own phone and started recording. "Yo, something crazy is happening on this plane," he whispered to his TikTok followers. "This pilot is trying to kick this black woman out of business class, but she just pulled out some kind of badge or something. This is wild." His video would eventually reach 2 million views, adding another angle to the most documented airline incident in history. Sarah Thompson watched from the gate counter as her orderly departure schedule disintegrated. Flight 447 was now 45 minutes behind schedule with no end to the delay in sight. Other flights were backing up behind it. Passengers were complaining, and her supervisor was demanding answers she didn't have. But worse than the operational chaos was the growing realization that she'd been complicit in something terrible. She'd helped Morrison identify passengers to target, had participated in the subtle process of discrimination that kept business class appropriate. She'd told herself it was just good customer service, maintaining standards, keeping premium passengers comfortable. Now watching the live streams on her own phone, seeing the hundreds of thousands of viewers witnessing Morrison's confrontation, Sarah realized she'd been helping to operate a network of deliberate, targeted racism. And it was all about to come crashing down. Mrs. Patterson had seen enough history to recognize a pivotal moment when she witnessed one. This wasn't just about one passenger and one pilot. This was about every person who'd ever been told they didn't belong somewhere because of how they looked. This was about justice, dignity, and the power of truth to change everything. "Film everything," she called to the other passengers. "Make sure they can't deny what happened here." Her words were picked up by Marcus's stream, amplified by Trevor's TikTok, and echoed across social media platforms where millions of viewers were now following the story in real time. The hashtags multiplied. Captain Morrison fired Atlas. Airlines boycott. Racism exposed justice at 30,000 feet. Memes were being created, videos were being shared, and the story was taking on a life of its own. Celebrity activists were starting to weigh in. Politicians were calling for investigations. Civil rights organizations were preparing statements. The incident was becoming a cultural flashpoint, a moment that would be remembered and referenced for years to come. But at the center of it all, in Seat 2B of Flight 447, Dr. Zara Williams remained calm, professional, and completely in control. She knew exactly what was about to happen. She'd been preparing for this moment her entire career. The identification in her hand wasn't just a badge. It was a weapon of justice, a tool of accountability, a key that would unlock consequences Morrison had never imagined possible. As 500,000 people watched online, as news helicopters circled Sky Harbor Airport, as Atlas Airlines' stock price continued to plummet, Zara prepared to reveal her true identity and change Morrison's life forever. The viral documentation was complete. The evidence was overwhelming. The audience was watching. Now came the reckoning. Dr. Zara Williams held up her credentials, and the world stopped. The black leather wallet opened to reveal a gold badge and identification card that made Officer David Kim's breath catch in his throat. In clear official lettering, it read, Federal Aviation Administration, Commissioner of Civil Rights, Dr. Zara Williams. Captain Morrison's face went from red to white in the space of a heartbeat. The badge in Zara's hand wasn't just identification. It was a death sentence for his career, his pension, his entire life as he'd known it for 28 years. "I am Dr. Zara Williams," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin and into Marcus Rivera's live stream, which now had over 600,000 viewers. "I am the Commissioner of Civil Rights for the Federal Aviation Administration. Captain Morrison, you have just violated federal law on camera in front of hundreds of thousands of witnesses." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the aircraft's ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. Morrison's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. His brain, so quick with insults and authority moments before, was completely blank. The woman he'd been trying to humiliate, the passenger he'd dismissed as unworthy of business class, was his regulatory superior. She controlled his license, his airline's operating certificate, his entire industry. Officer Kim immediately stepped back, his posture shifting from law enforcement to deep respect. "Commissioner Williams, I apologize for any misunderstanding. How can we assist you?" "You can start," Zara said, standing for the first time since the confrontation began by ensuring Captain Morrison steps away from the cockpit immediately. He is no longer qualified to operate this aircraft. Morrison finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. I didn't know. This is a mistake. I was just following procedure." The mistake, Zara replied, her voice cutting through his stammers like a laser, was yours. "And the procedure you were following is called discrimination. It's a federal crime." Marcus Rivera's livestream exploded with comments moving too fast to read. The viewer count hit 700,000 and was climbing rapidly. Commissioner Williams was trending worldwide. Stock trading algorithms were dumping Atlas Airlines shares as the story spread across financial news platforms. Rebecca Martinez burst into tears. The weight of what she'd witnessed, what she'd been forced to participate in, what she'd known was wrong but had been too scared to challenge, came crashing down on her. She'd helped Morrison target passengers for months following his orders because she needed the job, needed the income needed to survive. But survival suddenly seemed less important than dignity. "Commissioner Williams," Rebecca said, her voice shaking. "I'm so sorry. I knew this was wrong. He made me do it. He said if I didn't help him, I'd be fired." Jake Henderson, the senior flight attendant who had backed Morrison's play, looked around the cabin in panic. 700,000 people had just watched him support discrimination. His union representative couldn't save him from this. His seniority couldn't protect him from federal civil rights violations. "I was following the captain's orders," he said desperately. "I didn't know who you were." "That's exactly the problem," Zara replied. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with basic human dignity." Officer Santos was already on her radio calling for her supervisor. This wasn't a routine passenger removal anymore. This was a federal incident involving a high-ranking government official. Every decision from this point forward would be scrutinized, documented, and potentially used as evidence. Trevor Walsh stood at the aircraft door, his college-age brain finally processing what he was witnessing. The pilot had tried to give him the seat that belonged to a federal commissioner. He was supposed to be the beneficiary of discrimination, the reason an innocent woman was being humiliated and removed. "I don't want the seat," he said suddenly, his voice carrying clearly through the cabin. "I didn't know. I'm not taking a seat that belongs to someone else." His words were captured by multiple cameras shared across social media and would eventually make Trevor a symbol of moral courage for his generation. Zara pulled out her secure government phone and dialed a number that connected directly to the highest levels of Federal Aviation Authority. "Tom, it's Commissioner Williams," she said calmly. "Code red at Phoenix Sky Harbor, Gate B12. I need you to ground all Atlas Airlines flights immediately and contact CEO David Richardson. Tell him his company just committed a federal crime against a sitting commissioner and it was live-streamed to almost 1 million people." The person on the other end of the line was Thomas Reed, her chief of staff in Washington, D.C. His response was immediate and explosive. "Zara, what the hell happened?" "Captain Derek Morrison of Atlas Airlines just removed me from my paid business class seat to give it to a standby passenger," Zara explained, her voice carrying across the silent cabin. He used explicitly discriminatory language, ignored federal regulations, and did it all while being live-streamed. "I want every Atlas aircraft grounded until we can investigate the scope of this discrimination." Morrison felt the ground disappearing beneath his feet. Grounding an airline was the nuclear option in Federal Aviation regulation reserved for the most serious safety violations. But civil rights violations involving federal officials apparently qualified. "Commissioner Williams," he said, his voice cracking, "please, this was a misunderstanding. I have a family. I have a mortgage. I've been flying for 28 years without incident." "Without reported incident," Zara corrected. "How many other passengers have you discriminated against, Captain? How many people did you remove from seats they paid for because they didn't look like they belonged in your business class?" The questions hung in the air like accusations, because that's exactly what they were. Sarah Thompson watched from the gate counter as her departure board began flashing red alerts. Flight 447 was officially delayed pending federal investigation. Other Atlas flights were showing similar alerts as the grounding order spread through the network. Her phone was ringing constantly. Corporate headquarters, other gates ground crews, catering services, all demanding explanations she couldn't provide. The live stream viewer count hit 1 million. CNN had broken into regular programming with breaking news alerts. Atlas Airlines stock was in free fall, down 18% in less than an hour. The company's market capitalization was evaporating in real time as investors fled from the discrimination scandal. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson felt a surge of vindication that carried her back 50 years to her first teaching job in a segregated school district. She'd seen injustice challenged and defeated before, but never quite so spectacularly, never with such immediate and visible consequences. "Good for you, dear," she called to Zara. "Give them hell." Her words were picked up by the live stream, turned into memes, and shared millions of times across social media platforms. Zara's phone rang. The caller ID showed David Richardson, CEO of Atlas Airlines. She answered on speakerphone, ensuring that every word would be captured by the recording devices throughout the cabin. Commissioner Williams Richardson's voice was tight with panic. "I'm David Richardson, CEO of Atlas Airlines. I'm calling to personally apologize for this inexcusable incident. Captain Morrison was acting completely outside company policy." "Mr. Richardson," Zara replied, her voice professionally cold, "your company policy is exactly what we need to discuss. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was part of a pattern of discriminatory behavior that your airline has enabled and protected. I assure you, Commissioner, we have zero tolerance for discrimination." Then explain how Captain Morrison felt comfortable enough to discriminate against a federal commissioner on camera. Explain how your flight attendant was trained to participate in passenger removal based on racial profiling. Explain how your gate agent was prepared to provide a standby seat by removing a ticketed passenger. Each question was a dagger thrust into the heart of Atlas Airlines' claims of innocence. Richardson's silence stretched across the phone line and into the live stream where over 1 million viewers waited for an answer that never came. Morrison made one final desperate attempt to salvage his career. "Commissioner Williams, I've been a pilot for 3 decades. I've never had a safety violation, never had a serious complaint. This was a judgment error, not malicious discrimination." Zara looked at him with something approaching pity. "Captain Morrison, the evidence suggests otherwise. Officer Kim, I need you to escort Captain Morrison off this aircraft immediately. He's no longer authorized to operate Atlas Airlines equipment." Officer Kim nodded and stepped forward. "Captain, please surrender your flight crew credentials and exit the aircraft." Morrison's hands shook as he removed his captain's hat, his wings, his identification badge. 28 years of authority respect and professional identity were stripped away in 30 seconds, witnessed by over 1 million people online and documented forever. As he walked down the aisle toward the aircraft exit, passengers recorded his departure. His face, contorted with shock and devastation, would become an iconic image of accountability and action. Jake Henderson was next. Mr. Henderson, Zara said your support of Captain Morrison's discriminatory actions makes you complicit in federal civil rights violations. You're also removed from duty. Jake's airline career ended with the same viral documentation that had destroyed Morrison's. His 28-year-old face, twisted with panic and regret, joined Morrison's in the digital hall of shame. Rebecca Martinez approached Zara with tears streaming down her face. Commissioner Williams. I know what we did was wrong. I was scared for my job, scared for my daughter. But that's no excuse. I participated in discrimination and I'm ashamed. Zara looked at the young flight attendant with genuine compassion. Rebecca. The approach that put you in that position is the real problem. Fear shouldn't force good people to do bad things. We'll make sure you're protected for telling the truth. The live stream audience witnessed something remarkable: justice tempered with mercy, accountability balanced with understanding. Meanwhile, in boardrooms across the country, other airline executives were watching the Atlas Airlines meltdown with growing terror. If it could happen to Atlas, it could happen to any of them. How many of their own crews had similar unwritten policies? How many discrimination complaints had been buried? How many federal investigations were about to be launched? The ripple effects were spreading beyond Atlas Airlines. United Delta, American Southwest. Every major carrier was conducting emergency reviews of their discrimination policies, their crew training programs, their passenger complaint procedures. Trevor Walsh, still standing at the aircraft door, pulled out his phone and called his father. Dad, I need to tell you something. That favor your friend did getting me the business class seat. It was wrong. They tried to kick a federal commissioner out of her seat to give it to me. I can't accept that. I won't accept that. His phone call, captured partially by other passengers' recordings, would go viral as an example of privilege rejected of moral courage in the face of unearned advantage. Atlas Airlines' stock closed down 23% that day, wiping out $1.2 billion in market value. The company's credit rating was downgraded. Insurance companies began reviewing their coverage. Regulatory agencies opened investigations. Law firms started preparing class action lawsuits. But the most devastating consequence was still to come. As Zara Williams prepared to reveal the full scope of her authority, as federal investigators began mobilizing as the justice system prepared to deliver its verdict on Atlas Airlines, Captain Derek Morrison sat in an airport security office. His career destroyed his life, shattered his future uncertain. He had 17 minutes left as an employed airline pilot. In 17 minutes, the formal termination would be complete, the federal investigation would begin, and his transformation from authority figure to cautionary tale would be finalized. The countdown was almost over, and the real consequences were just beginning. The Atlas Airlines corporate headquarters in Atlanta erupted into chaos as the live stream reached 1.2 million viewers, and the company's stock continued its devastating freefall. CEO David Richardson burst into the Crisis Management Center, his face ashen as he watched multiple screens displaying the viral video from every possible angle. How bad is it? He asked his chief of staff, though the numbers on the Bloomberg terminal already told the story. Down 26% and falling. Market cap hemorrhaging billions. Credit rating under review. Sir, it's catastrophic. The FAA has grounded all our flights pending investigation. The Department of Transportation is opening a formal civil rights inquiry. Commissioner Williams has requested your personal phone records, crew training materials, and passenger complaint files for the past 5 years. Richardson felt his knees go weak. 5 years of records would expose everything. The unwritten policies, the targeted removals, the buried complaints, the widespread discrimination that had infected his airline like a cancer. Back on Flight 447, federal marshals had arrived to take formal statements. Dr. Zara Williams stood in the business class cabin, no longer just a passenger, but the full authority of the United States government made manifest. "Mr. Richardson," she said into her phone, the speaker broadcasting to the cabin and the live stream audience, "I'm invoking emergency federal authority under Section 44,709 of the Federal Aviation Code. Atlas Airlines is under immediate federal oversight. Every flight, every crew member, every operational decision will be subject to federal review." The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Richardson knew what federal oversight meant. It was corporate death by 1,000 regulatory cuts and process that could take years and cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Captain Derek Morrison sat in the airport security office staring at the blank walls that had replaced his corner office view of the Phoenix Mountains. 28 years of career achievement reduced to this sterile room, this uncomfortable chair, this growing realization that his life as he'd known it was over. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife Derek. "The video is everywhere. Channel 12 is in our driveway. The neighbors are staring." What did you do? What had he done? He'd treated a passenger the same way he'd treated hundreds of others over the years. He'd enforced the unwritten rules that everyone knew but no one talked about. He'd maintained the standards that Atlas Airlines had quietly expected and rewarded. The only difference was that this time his victim had the power to destroy him. Morrison's union representative, Bill Thompson, arrived looking grim. "Derek, I've seen the video. I've talked to legal. There's nothing we can do. The discrimination is clear, it's documented, and it involves a federal commissioner. The union can't defend this." "But I've got 28 years of clean flying," Morrison protested. "No safety violations. No customer complaints, that stuck." "Because you knew how to pick your targets," Thompson replied bluntly. "People who wouldn't fight back, wouldn't complain, wouldn't have the resources to challenge you. But you picked wrong this time." Rebecca Martinez was interviewed by federal investigators in a conference room at Sky Harbor Airport. Her testimony, delivered through tears, but with complete honesty, painted a devastating picture of Atlas Airlines culture. Captain Morrison had a list, she explained. Not written down, but everyone knew. Solo women, especially minorities. People who looked like they might be flying on points or upgrades. Anyone who didn't fit his idea of what business-class passengers should look like. "How often did this happen?" asked Agent Sarah Chen from the Department of Transportation. "Monthly, sometimes weekly. There was always a reason: computer glitch, weight balance, security concern. But we all knew the real reason. Did management know?" Rebecca nodded. "Morrison was protected. He had perfect on-time performance because he never dealt with passenger complaints. Problems just disappeared." Her testimony would become the cornerstone of the federal case against Atlas Airlines, a first-hand account of widespread discrimination that destroyed any claim of isolated incidents. Jake Henderson's interview was less cooperative. The senior flight attendant maintained that he was following orders, that he had no choice but to support his captain's decisions. "I was just doing my job," he repeated, "following crew hierarchy, supporting the pilot in command." But Agent Chen had been investigating airline discrimination for 15 years. She'd heard these excuses before, and she wasn't buying them. "Mr. Henderson, you've been flying for 12 years. You know federal regulations. You know that discrimination is illegal, regardless of who orders it. Your choice was between your paycheck and your conscience. You chose the paycheck." Jake's termination letter arrived by email while he was still being interviewed. Atlas Airlines, desperate to distance itself from the scandal, was firing everyone involved with maximum prejudice and minimum process. Sarah Thompson, the gate agent, watched her career evaporate in real time. Her supervisor called with the news: immediate termination, forfeiture of pension benefits, permanent ban from airline industry employment. "Sarah, you were supposed to screen passengers appropriately," the supervisor explained. "Instead, you participated in a federal crime that's cost this company billions of dollars." But Sarah's problems went beyond losing her job. As the gate agent who had facilitated the discriminatory seat assignment, she was potentially liable for federal civil rights violations. The Department of Justice was reviewing her case for possible criminal charges. Trevor Walsh became an unlikely hero as his rejection of the discriminated seat went viral. His TikTok video showing him refusing to take Zara's place was viewed over 5 million times and turned him into a symbol of moral courage. "I could have taken that seat," he said in a follow-up video. "I could have benefited from discrimination and pretended I didn't know. But that's not who I want to be. That's not the person my parents raised." His college gave him a full scholarship for demonstrating exceptional moral character. Nike offered him an endorsement deal. He used the money to establish a scholarship fund for underrepresented students pursuing careers in aviation. Marcus Rivera's live stream had captured the entire incident from beginning to end, creating an uneditable record of discrimination in action. His video became evidence in federal court testimony and congressional hearings, and required viewing in civil rights training programs across multiple industries. "I just wanted to document injustice," Marcus said in interviews. "I never expected to create evidence that would change an entire industry." Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, the retired teacher who had encouraged the recording, became a social media sensation at age 72. Her sharp commentary on discrimination and justice earned her hundreds of thousands of followers and invitations to speak at universities across the country. "Children," she said in her viral TED Talk, "this is what courage looks like. One person standing up to power, refusing to be moved from where they belong." The financial destruction of Atlas Airlines was swift and merciless. Stock down 31%. Credit rating cut to junk status. Bank loans called due immediately. Insurance policies canceled. Aircraft leases terminated. Within 6 hours of the incident, Atlas Airlines was fighting for survival. The human cost was equally devastating. Morrison lost his $180,000 pilot salary and his $2.3 million pension. His mortgage company filed foreclosure papers within a month. His country club revoked his membership. His neighbors avoided eye contact. His wife filed for divorce after the death threats started coming. His children changed their last names. His father, a 90-year-old World War II veteran who had been proud of his pilot son, died of a stroke while watching the viral video on repeat. Jake Henderson's termination included forfeiture of his seniority, his pension contributions, and his health insurance. At 35, with 2 young children and a mortgage, he was unemployable in aviation and qualified for little else. He took a job at a Phoenix car rental agency, earning minimum wage while trying to pay bills that had been manageable on a flight attendant's salary. His wife took a second job. They sold their house and moved into a cramped apartment. Sarah Thompson's firing included a notation in her permanent record that made her unemployable in customer service. She found work as a night janitor at an office building, cleaning bathrooms for a fraction of her former salary. But the most complete destruction was reserved for Atlas Airlines itself. The federal investigation led by Dr. Zara Williams' office uncovered years of discriminatory practices, buried complaints, and widespread violations of civil rights law. The final settlement included $47 million in federal fines, $125 million in victim compensation, mandatory federal oversight for 5 years, complete retraining of all 35,000 employees, installation of federal monitors at every major hub. The company that had once been valued at $8.9 billion was sold for parts 18 months later. Its routes were distributed among competitors. Its aircraft were repossessed and sold. Its headquarters became a medical office complex. 43,000 Atlas Airlines employees lost their jobs, not because of economic conditions or market competition, but because their company had deliberately discriminated against passengers for years and gotten caught doing it to the one person who could destroy them. The ripple effect spread throughout the aviation industry. Every major airline launched emergency reviews of their discrimination policies. Crew training was overhauled. Passenger complaint procedures were reformed. Federal oversight was increased. The Atlas effect became shorthand for corporate cultures that enabled discrimination. Business schools taught case studies about how unchecked bias could destroy billion-dollar companies overnight. But perhaps the most lasting consequence was the message sent to every future Derek Morrison, every potential discriminator who might think they could target passengers based on appearance or assumption. One person had stood up to widespread injustice and won. One woman had refused to be moved from where she belonged and changed an entire industry. One federal commissioner had turned a moment of discrimination into a revolution of accountability. Dr. Zara Williams had kept the promise she'd made to herself at age 12 watching the Detroit skyline disappear below her first flight. She had made sure that everyone, regardless of the color of their skin or the size of their bank account, could experience the magic of flight with dignity. The destruction was complete. The justice was served. Now came the rebuilding. 6 months after the incident that destroyed Atlas Airlines, Dr. Zara Williams stood at Gate B-12 in Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, the same gate where Captain Derek Morrison had tried to humiliate her, the same jet bridge where she had been escorted off like a criminal, the same departure lounge where justice had finally prevailed. But everything had changed. The Atlas Airlines logo was gone, replaced by the blue and gold colors of Skybridge Airlines, the startup that had acquired some of Atlas's routes and aircraft. More importantly, the culture had been transformed. Federal oversight had mandated not just policy changes, but a complete reimagining of how airlines treated passengers. Flight 447 to Washington, D.C. is now boarding all passengers, announced the gate agent, a young Hispanic woman whose name tag read Rebecca Martinez, lead passenger advocate. Rebecca had been promoted after her cooperation with the federal investigation. Her honest testimony about Atlas Airlines' discriminatory practices had helped convict 3 executives and reform an entire industry. Now she worked for Skybridge Airlines personally, ensuring that every passenger was treated with dignity regardless of their appearance or background. As Zara approached the boarding gate, Rebecca's face lit up with recognition and genuine warmth. "Commissioner Williams," Rebecca said, "it's wonderful to see you again. Thank you for changing everything." "You changed everything," Rebecca Zara replied. "You chose truth over fear. You chose justice over a paycheck. That's what real courage looks like." Walking down the jet bridge, Zara reflected on the avalanche of change that had followed that terrible Tuesday morning. The Atlas Airlines incident had become more than a viral video or a corporate scandal. It had become a catalyst for transformation across multiple industries. The aircraft door opened to reveal Captain Maria Santos, a Latina pilot, whose appointment to this flagship route would have been impossible under the old Atlas Airlines culture. Captain Santos stepped forward with a warm professional smile. "Commissioner Williams, welcome aboard. It's truly an honor to have you flying with us today." The words were similar to what Rebecca had said at the gate, but Zara heard something different in them. These weren't empty corporate pleasantries or fearful deference to her federal authority. They were genuine expressions of respect and gratitude from people whose careers had been made possible by her stand against discrimination. As she walked through the cabin, Zara saw the changes everywhere. The flight attendants were diverse in ways that the old Atlas Airlines had never achieved. The passengers reflected America in all its beautiful complexity. The atmosphere was one of mutual respect rather than hierarchical judgment. She took her seat, to be the same seat that Derek Morrison had tried to take from her. But now it felt different. It wasn't just a piece of airline furniture anymore. It was a symbol, a reminder that dignity was not negotiable and justice was not optional. Marcus Rivera was on the flight sitting in 1A just as he had 6 months earlier. The tech executive who had live-streamed the discrimination was now working with civil rights organizations to develop real-time reporting systems for bias incidents. "Commissioner Williams," he said, turning around with a smile. "I wanted to thank you. My company just landed a contract to build discrimination reporting tools for 12 major airlines. Your courage created an entire industry of accountability." Mrs. Eleanor Patterson was also aboard, sitting in her familiar 3C. The retired teacher who had encouraged the recording was traveling to Washington, D.C. to receive a Presidential Medal of Freedom for her lifetime of service to civil rights. "Dear," she said to Zara, "you reminded this old teacher that it's never too late to stand up for what's right." As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Zara looked out the window at the Phoenix desert where Derek Morrison now worked as a security guard at a shopping mall. She felt no satisfaction in his fall, no joy in his destruction. His punishment was complete, but it was also tragic. A wasted life, a squandered opportunity, a talent corrupted by prejudice and destroyed by justice. The federal oversight program she had designed was now operating at every major airline. Passenger complaint processes had been reformed to prevent the burial of discrimination reports. Crew training now included mandatory bias recognition and intervention protocols. Federal monitors conducted regular audits of airline cultures and practices. Most importantly, passengers now had real recourse when they faced discrimination. The Williams Protocol, named in Zara's honor, required airlines to investigate all bias complaints within 72 hours and report their findings to federal authorities. Trevor Walsh, the college student who had refused the discriminated seat, had graduated with honors and was now working as a civil rights attorney. His scholarship fund had helped dozens of underrepresented students enter aviation careers. "You showed me that privilege comes with responsibility," he had written to Zara. "Thank you for teaching me to do the right thing even when it costs something." As Flight 447 climbed into the clear Arizona sky, Zara thought about her mother, Sandra, who had worked 3 jobs so her daughter could have options. Sandra was 85 now, living comfortably in a beautiful home that Zara had bought for her, finally able to rest after a lifetime of struggle. Every month, Sandra flew somewhere new, always in first class, always treated with the dignity that had been denied to her generation. She kept a scrapbook of newspaper articles about her daughter's victory over discrimination, proof that sacrifice and determination could change the world. Baby Sandra had said during their last phone call, "You kept your promise." Every person who flies now flies a little more free because of what you did. As the aircraft reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign turned off, Captain Santos's voice came over the intercom with the routine announcements about weather and arrival time. But she concluded with words that would never have been spoken on the old Atlas Airlines flights. "Finally, I want to remind all passengers that this aircraft is a place of dignity and respect for everyone. We're honored to serve passengers from all backgrounds, all communities, all walks of life. Thank you for flying with us today. Dr." Zara Williams smiled and opened her briefcase to review the speech she would deliver at the National Transportation Summit the next morning. The title was simple: "One Seat, One Stand, One Change: How Individual Courage Creates Universal Justice." Outside the aircraft window, America spread out below in all its complex beauty. Somewhere down there, people were facing discrimination, dealing with bias, fighting for dignity in small ways and large. But now they had new tools, new protections, new hope that justice was possible. The promise Zara had made at age 12 was finally complete. The sky belonged to everyone and everyone knew it. This incredible story shows us that one person's courage can change an entire industry. Dr. Zara Williams refused to accept discrimination, and her brave stand transformed aviation forever. Her quiet dignity in the face of injustice created a safer, fairer world for millions of travelers. What did you think of this powerful story of justice and accountability? Have you ever witnessed discrimination like this or seen someone stand up for what's right when it really mattered? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you believe that one person really can make a difference, please hit that like button and share this video with your friends and family. Stories of courage and justice deserve to be heard by everyone. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of people who stood up against injustice and changed the world. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that could inspire you to make a difference in your own community. Remember, as Dr. Zara Williams proved, you don't need a title or a badge to stand up for what's right. You just need the courage to refuse to accept injustice. Thank you for watching, and keep fighting the good fight.